Tired. Back in 1967, Bob was a missile launch officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. He says a UFO hovered over his nuclear missile site and disabled all the missiles.
And so, Carl, here's the million-dollar question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So, non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
Roswell, New Mexico is a quiet city of just 26,000 people. The majority of the population are ranchers or military.
And so, Carl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
My name is Dale, and I want to welcome you to Observer of Anomalous Objects. This channel is mainly about UFOs, but it covers a whole bunch of different areas of the paranormal. And so I'm really excited today. We're going to branch out a little bit, and we're going to talk about the psychic phenomenon. In fact, we're going to talk about Darcy Weir's new film, The Psychic Phenomenon. Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of information about Darcy in case you're not familiar with him. Let me read his bio for you. It says, since 2012, Darcy Weir, who resides in Alberta, Edmonton, Canada, has been on a mission to bring the world's most captivating mysteries, UAP/UFOs, ETs, cryptids, Bitcoin, and beyond, into the global spotlight through his talents as a filmmaker. During the course of his 13-year career, Weir has produced a remarkable 20 productions, 18 feature-length documentaries, and 2 TV docuseries, each accessible on Amazon Prime and Apple. Weir's goal is to shine a new light on these enigmatic topics, thus making the information about them more accessible to the general public. Through his diverse, gripping, and well-researched films and TV presentations, Darcy Weir has become both a well-respected as well as high-profile voice within the global disclosure movement. Darcy Weir is currently available for UAP/UFO conference presentations, lectures, podcasts, film screenings, and radio interviews. His goal is to share the amazing findings he has discovered and uncovered during the course of his very successful filmmaking career. And this is the movie that I'm talking about. It is The Psychic Phenomenon. And without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Darcy onto the stage. And so, Darcy, it's good to have you with us. This is your second appearance on the podcast. And let me tell you something. I am so excited to have you back on again. Last time I had to share you with Andy and Rob. This time I get you all to myself. And boy, have I got some questions for you, my friend.
Pastor Dale, it's great to be back. How are you doing, man?
You just blew my cover. I don't think a lot of people even know I'm a pastor. Now they know, but that's okay. I'm not that kind of pastor. And which is unique because Darcy and I have teamed up together in a space. One of the neat things is we met together for the first time face-to-face in Pasadena, California. And that wasn't even planned. It was just, I was in Pasadena. You happened to be in Pasadena the same day. I mean, what are the odds of that?
It's great, man. Great synchronicity. I look forward to meeting up with you again and having great conversation and sharing some bubble teas.
That's what I was going to say. You only made one mistake. You gave a man caffeine who hadn't had caffeine in several years, and he absolutely talked your ear off. But I'm telling you what, that was such an amazing time.
I gave you the energy to drive back home, man.
You did. You gave me all I needed. I had wings to be able to go and do that with. But anyway, Darcy, we're so grateful that you're here. It's nice to always be able to interview somebody who's a friend. I mean, I've got other people I interview that are friends, but you and I are a little bit closer than most. And so what's it like being a new dad?
It's energy, draining, but every time you look in their face, you just, it should, for most people, I think, just brighten you up and make you realize what your life should really be about. And that is making sure that this individual has the best chance and, the best future possible. Feel blessed.
Well, and you are blessed. And there's nothing like looking in that face of that child and knowing that your DNA is there and that's part you. And that's an amazing feeling. I have 2 kids myself, and they're grown up now. You're beginning the journey. I'm at the end of it.
So far behind, but yeah,
it never gets to the point where you don't worry about them, though. I'll tell you that right now. Well, let's go ahead and jump in because we only have about an hour to do. So let me ask the question. You've done a lot of stuff on cryptids and UFOs and different paranormal issues. What made you decide to jump into the topic of the psychic phenomenon?
Yeah, well, I was talking with a friend, Tracy Garbett Dolan, who's the wife of Richard Dolan, another friend of mine, at Contact in the Desert. And I had just seen her presentation she had done on, quantum science. She was talking about the mind, the brain, consciousness, basically floating the idea that the brain is a room temp quantum computer before it became popular to say on American Alchemy. But she basically opened me up to the idea of psychic phenomenon, and she's a veteran in that space. She's studied at Ramtha Mystery School, and she's went to the Monroe Institute and stuff like that. So yeah, we started talking. She connected me with Russell Targ, the former director of Stargate program and Stanford's SRI remote viewing program. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. I had a friend, Ryder Lee, connect me with Paul H. Smith, who was part of the DIA program. And he took over the Ingo Swann School of Teaching Remote Viewing, and he still teaches people there today how to become remote viewers with his protocols. And then I connected with Chris Ramsey. Chris Ramsey allowed me to use some of his research with Ed May and Joe McMoneagle. I interviewed Chris for the doc too, and just what his journey was in training up to Protocol 4 as a remote viewer. And I think a bunch of other stuff that fell into place was eventually connecting with Dr. Jeffrey Tarrant, who his work is featured in the telepathy tapes, if people don't know who he is. But he's connected with psychic mediums, clairvoyants, and wants to connect with more like remote viewers and stuff. And he puts a EEG helmet on people's heads and reads their brain activity when they're doing these psychic abilities. And he's found some interesting data, and he's kind of like learning about the human brain in terms of people that appear to have these abilities. So we have him in the doc, and it just, every time I start on a journey, an occult journey to research something new, it's my journey, it's my learning, it's my experience and my own thoughts on it too. And I'm really happy that I got to take a look at this phenomenon.
Well, that's true. I mean, I've done some teaching, and the one thing that's valuable about teaching is you learn more than even the students you're teaching, because you can't convey everything. And so I can imagine it works the same way when you're putting a film together, a documentary together, or something like that. The true blessing of it is not just what you get to share with others, but what you get to learn for yourself. Okay, here's something I think maybe some people might be confused about. And I'm going to ask questions that maybe sometimes I know the answer to, but I ask them in light of who the audience is to make sure that maybe if there's a question. The question is, who's the true number one or first remote viewer? Because the confusion comes in, is it Ingleswan or is it Joe McMoneagle? Because McMoneagle's, they gave him the title Remote Viewer 001. And so who is the original remote viewer?
So that would be Ingo Swann, because Ingo Swann coined the name remote viewing. He actually invented the strategy of looking, using your mind's eye and looking at a location out in a distance and writing it down and calculating what that might be psychically. Joe, he was brought in under the DIA's program and given that number.
Yeah, and it had something to do with now all of a sudden it was like military. The military had taken over. I think that was in 1978. So you got to realize that Ingo Swann came in 6 years earlier.
Yeah,
so
he was under Russell Targ initially with RSI. And so they were workshopping and developing this and perfecting it until it became a DIA program where they were psychically spying and trying to gain intelligence from it about their adversaries like Russia.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this, but the term Stargate is kind of an umbrella for all of the different programs they had over the years, from Scanet to Grill Flame to Centerlane to Sunstreak. And so they all fell under this. They decided to consolidate them all and just call them Stargate and stuff. So, but my question for you, the reason I brought that up is why was Project Stargate so important in proving the validity of remote viewing?
Well, I mean, we have methods of gaining intelligence or data about our adversaries, right? Back then, it would have been flying a spy plane. We saw what happened with the spy plane that flew over Cuba and started the Cuban Missile Crisis. It got detected and shot at. And that spy plane took some great photos, and the United States gained intel that there were long-range ballistic missiles nearby that could reach American landfall, right? Mm-hmm. So that is one way, taking pictures, right? And nowadays we have satellites that can take 4K video or pictures of objects really close up. Like you can read the back of the license plate on a car from space. But what about taking a photo of a building and then wondering what is inside that building? Who is inside that building? What are they doing inside that building? A satellite image can only go so far. So when you use these psychics to remote view that location, one of the things that Russell Targ talks about with one of the most powerful psychics he ever worked with, Pat Price. Pat Price was the type of individual that had the ability to look inside of a building, look inside of a safe, and then look at the papers that were inside of that safe and read what was on them. Wow. That's the type of thing, the capability that the American intelligence or military would be interested in having.
Wow, that's amazing. I was trying to remember if it was Pat Price or if it was a different remote viewer, the one who died in the hotel room, and they were trying to figure out if the KGB killed him or not. It was one of the it may not have been Pat Price, but it was one of the early guys or one of the famous ones, because there've been a couple documentaries on it. I wasn't sure if you knew who that was or not. Okay,
in a hotel room, I think Pat Price. Yeah.
Okay. That's the name that was ringing a bell, but that doesn't mean
people do believe that the CIA killed him because.
Oh, is that another one? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they think that Russell Targ even believes it, that he was possibly leaking secrets of their program to the Church of Scientology. And the Church of Scientology, he was a high-ranking member, and they don't want that information to get out to an adversary, so they might have killed him.
Yeah, you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies, I think is the phrase that goes along with that.
That's right.
Okay, now you mentioned you talked to Tracy Dolan, and I saw another lady in the film named Laura Jackson.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So those are like modern day psychics, remote viewers. Is there a difference as we look back and we do the study of back to Ingle Swan and Pat Price and all these? I mean, some of them are still living today. Some of them are gone. But is there a difference between well, I'll just call them the old guard remote viewers and psychics and what we're experiencing? Is there an evolution at all taking place here?
So Lori is a medium, a psychic medium. She's not a remote viewer per se. But she demonstrates capabilities that she uses her mind's eye, and she's able to precognitively predict what's to come in a person's life. So see the future events, what has happened in the past, what their family's like, their relationships. She looks into people. And it's all kind of related. So that's why I wanted to include her story through Dr. Jeffrey Tarrant, who is, again, like mapping her brain activity and seeing the occipital lobe was lighting up at the back left of the brain whenever she was doing one of these accurate readings. A remote viewer is following protocols. And I think that's important because, if we want this to go mainstream, if we want people to take this seriously, like UFOs, we want to see it's a repeatable experiment. We want to see that it's conclusively, there's evidence to this thing existing, right? Repeatable observability, that type of thing in the scientific method. And so when remote viewers follow these protocols, they have a monitor that is watching them and pushing them and conducting the test and having them try and complete viewing the target that they've been handed psychically. So I think that's the difference, is that it's like kind of a controlled experiment sort of study with remote viewing. And then mediumship is just straight up psychic ability, talking to somebody and reading them and reading future events, present events, or past events without even really knowing the person. This is without Googling them and finding out their social media and, reading news about them or something.
And she was psychic and medium both. It seemed like that one part of the things that both two sides of her brain were lighting up. I had a question. I don't know. It'd be a doctor probably to have to explain it. Is how do they know when the brain lights up that it's doing what they think it's doing, and it couldn't be just the imagination in the brain, which we're going to get to that in a little bit as well too. How do they scientifically assess that? So
with Jeffrey, when I asked him that question, because of course I asked the same sort of thing in the doc, he said, well, I wrote down all the things that she was saying about things to come in my future, like the person I was going to work for, I was going to move to this city, I was going to, do this type of research. My wife is this type of person. My kids, I have a daughter and son, and they're two different types of personalities. I think he wrote down all of these things that she was saying about him, reading him. And then as time passed, he looks at his notes and he's checking off, okay, that happened. And I mean, to move to a completely different state, I think in his case, it was moving all the way to Jersey and working there. It's kind of a, pretty good prediction if that comes true. And all these things started adding up, and he realized, okay, she's psychic. She knew me, she knew my family, she knew them somehow, and then predicted what was going to happen for me. So I think that's that's the trick. I've been to a psychic before, and they've made kind of broad-based, generalized predictions, and I don't think that person was very psychic. I think that with everything, there's people that are truly psychic and have incredible natural abilities, and then there's people that kind of maybe want clout, attention, and they pretend to be something they're not.
What is it, Madame Cleo from years past? And when you think
what
about
is it, child? What is it I can tell you about your future?
You got it. You nailed it. So that's why when I first thought about psychics and stuff, that's the image that came to me. And so it was like, okay, I don't think there's much to it. If this is what psychics are, then I'm probably not going to be too interested in it, because that's all about money for a lot of them. Now, I think there are some legitimate ones out there. And I think Laura Jackson, is living proof of that. And so I think there's a lot to learn. The bad thing is what you said. There are legitimate people in every field, and then there are people who are going to try to make a buck off of it. And that's what it's all about. And ufology is the exact same way. People come into this field not necessarily because they want disclosure, but because they see opportunity.
Right.
And so same thing with the psychic phenomenon. The next question I have, which really fits into with what you just mentioned, and that is, how do we get the scientific world to take this subject more seriously? I mean, I know that there is the Monroe Institute, and I know that they do a lot of scientific studies. Are there any other groups? I mean, you mentioned Dr. Tarrant, I believe it was, and
Jeffrey
obviously
Tarrant,
he's doing some studies on it. But are there any other like full organizations like the Monroe Institute, started by Robert Monroe? Are there any organizations like that trying to help prove that this is scientific, so we can get the scientific community to come in and look at this subject?
Yeah, well, Diane Hennessy Powell is doing some great research. She's a Harvard professor, and she worked with the telepathy tapes with K.Y. Dickens. And, that's a professor at a very prestigious university in the United States of America that is taking this seriously, and they are documenting the process and the results of highly psychic children. I think they're looking more into things like the GATE program and how the United States might have been recruiting adolescents and younger women and gentlemen through high schools, and maybe bringing them into government military sort of experiment environments and seeing if they're psychic by doing tests and poking and prodding them, so to speak. So I think there's a lot there that has happened also outside of the academic and scientific arena, behind closed doors in sort of like a more classified setting. And I think a filter or a gateway into that was the Gateway program.
Wow. When I hear the terms ESP and I hear psychic abilities and I hear remote viewing, it's for me anyway, and I imagine I'm not the only one on this. It's sometimes it's hard to parse those, because they seem to be so entangled together to try to figure out how to do that. I mean, obviously, not every psychic's a remote viewer. I think you might be able to argue that every remote viewer has some form of either psychic ability or ESP. But so my question is, how do we understand? Is it like the psychic abilities? Is that like the umbrella that you would put ESP and remote viewers under? Like that's the mother, and these are the little branches of it, like the tree, and these are the branches or something like. Is it kind of like Stargate, what we talked about earlier? You had all these different programs through the years, and they just finally gave it one big name, and then every one of those programs would fall under Stargate. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, like psychic is the description of somebody that's able to use their mind's eye, use extrasensory perception, and see, beyond the conventional senses, through seeing with your eyes and hearing with your ears and smelling with your nose. You're actually just using your mind to see. And remote viewing is the actual government, military, and intelligence tested protocols to psychically see things. And like I said, it's more of like a practice and a method to do it in a sort of a controlled study group with certain protocols. But there's people that are clairvoyants, mediums, right? Like we talked about earlier, and that's different. That's just a straight up psychic. They're not using protocols or like some kind of scientific system. Then you've got, I was trying to think about it earlier when I was going on this rant, but people that connect with their dogs, believe it or not. Parapsychology is what this has been labeled as when people study ESP in an academic setting, right? And that, even the name in itself, because it's para, it associates paranormal, and it sometimes has this kind of like immediate pseudoscience view by the rest of the academic institutions out there. But Rupert Sheldrake, he studied psychic abilities and he wrote a bunch of books about it. One of which is just the idea that pets have a psychic connection with their owners. And he studied a famous case where this individual had a dog that somehow knew intuitively every time their owner made a intention that they were going to go home from work, the dog would go to the front door, and they set up a camera and they had a controlled experiment to see if, maybe the dog just built the schedule in its mind. Oh, he'll come back or she'll come back at 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. after work. But they debunked that and showed that even if the dog sensed that the owner was coming back at 20 minutes after being at work, somehow it knew and would be waiting at the front door immediately. So I think when we talk about humans being psychic, there's also non-human intelligence that are psychic, which works with other animals on the planet. And then humans innately have, everybody I think has some kind of psychic ability. It can be really small, and it can be, Pat Price quality or Ingo Swann, where they're extremely psychic and they can have out of body experiences and view places on Mars or on the moon.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we will. And so like a very low level psychic ability, again, tested by Rupert Sheldrake, is, when somebody has that sense that they're being watched, and you'll be at a mall or you'll be at a restaurant or bar, and you'll feel somebody's gaze or stare, and you'll turn around and look directly in their eyes and connect with them, and then they'll look away or whatever. Maybe it gets awkward. Maybe they'll give you a wave. Who knows? But just that ability to be to detect that might just be even kind of a low-level psychic instinct that we learned from our time living in the wild, where a predator might have been watching us, right, and we figured it out really quick and then started running. You know what I mean? Like, just everybody kind of has a certain degree. And I think with this documentary, we're kind of going way out there and saying, like,
that would be the beginning.
Yeah, maybe this is like something that can be trained. Mm-hmm. You're only going to learn up to your natural ability as your maximum, but there are incredibly powerful psychics out there. And then maybe there's non-human intelligence that are psychic as well.
Right. And I think it's complex too, because there are people that are psychic that may not predict things coming in the future. They may not have the senses you're talking about, but yet stuff comes to them. and they don't know where it came from. And, you know, I had one experience in my life that was, there's things that I get sometimes that I shouldn't know that I know, and I can't even really explain it. But there was one incident where something came to me, and I mean, it was specific, and most of the stuff isn't like that. I just figure out stuff that I shouldn't be able to figure out, and over again. But this was just absolutely told me something that was going to happen. And when it wasn't so much a predictor, you know, as much as, I don't know why, I guess it was getting my attention, but and I almost told my buddy who I was with about it, but I didn't want to look stupid or crazy to him. So I kept my mouth shut, and it turned out to be true. And then afterwards I told him, but I wish I had told him before. But so I think the point I'm making, I want to go in this story itself, but the point I'm making is I think this stuff is complex. You can have one aspect of it without having another. I mean, being psychic doesn't mean you have everything. You can have a part of this, but not this part, at least from my understanding and my own personal experience. Now, since we're into this is, you're really lining these questions up perfectly with your dialogue. I think it was both Paul Smith and Ingo Swann also before him had brought up the issue that they believe in, and this wasn't my thing when I first got here, I'll be upfront. I mean, I was a nuts and bolts type guy, and anytime you started going into the psychic or the spiritual realm, I mean, I wanted no part of it, because I you know, being a pastor, I left all of that, I put it aside so I could look at it, you know, without being biased, at least the least amount of bias as I could. But I'm really, really starting to look at things differently. I guess it's part of the maturity process of getting into community and really hearing stories and hearing the evidence, hearing the stories of Ingo Swann and the stuff that he did. But Paul was the one talking about it in your series, and I think he quoted Ingo Swann as well, but that these beings, these aliens, extraterrestrials, NHI, whatever you want to call them, seem to have psychic abilities that are more enhanced than what ours are. But and that was believable when they look in your eye and they, you know, get you to forget stuff or whatever. I mean, that was okay. But to go to the next level of saying that they're afraid of our psychic abilities, that our abilities, our natural abilities, will go beyond theirs. And so, which was shocking to me, is he was talking about how that we're being suppressed because they're afraid. And I can understand we can be a pretty scary species sometimes, but that they're using other people. And I think he quoted Ingo Swann on that part of it, if I heard it right. And that they are actually using other people, the critics, the debunkers, the skeptics, to come out and try to say, oh, there's nothing to this. And we bought it for years and years and years. But I think it's all coming together at the same time, Darcy. I mean, as we talk about UAPs, as we talk about all this paranormal stuff that everybody was always taught their whole life, or majority people, that there's nothing to this, only crazy people follow this is all conspiracy theory. It seems like now, finally, maybe for the first time in maybe hundreds of years, you know, our scientific community is very different than what it would have been hundreds of years ago. But I'm talking about those who were thinking, you know, logically, they're finally coming along and saying, you know what? There's some evidence to this stuff. This isn't just all make believe. These people aren't all crazy. They aren't all 10-hatters and stuff. So, you know, I was just, what did you think about that? I you know, I know obviously you have these people on as guests and you don't want to insult them and stuff like that. But man, that was a little bit further out there than I expected.
Yeah, I think the idea, to just dumb it down, is the idea of the matrix, that we live in a society where information is accepted on a greater truth sort of perspective for society and for the way we operate and communicate and understand the world around us. And so Ingo Swann was theorizing that, and Paul Smith was talking about that in the documentary, that basically Ingo feared that non-human intelligence knew that we had the ability to be psychic. They didn't want us to exploit that or understand that more. And they also didn't want the non-human intelligence existence to be known internationally and in the mainstream. They actually preferred to run our society and manufacture the truth through the powers that be, which is like kind of manipulating the matrix, you know what I mean? And that is powerful in sort of like communicating that maybe if there is a non-human intelligence, they aren't all good. And if they are out there, they're manipulating mankind in a direction that's beneficial for them, and not necessarily for us in our own freedom, right? I think that's basically dumbing it down here. That's kind of the idea. And making sure that the truth about their existence isn't out there is in their favor, right? So yeah, manipulating the masses, manipulating our future, like all that stuff is in consideration within that theory and that perspective. And it's kind of scary. I mean, like, of course, you don't want to think that. Everybody wants to think they can manifest their own destiny, but when the system that you're trying to manifest your destiny within is rigged against you, that's a problem. Right. And I'm working on a documentary right now. My thesis is kind of like that the system is kind of rigged. Look at the planet right now. There is hope out there. Like, there is the ability to try and pursue something better for your life, but there's mass wars going on where hundreds of thousands of people are dying every day. Especially with the conflicts in the Middle East right now and in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. You've got lies being bought and sold to the American public and the international public in terms of this discussion, as well as things like the Epstein files that were promised, or the full JFK files that were promised, and all this other stuff, and assassinations happening of prominent speakers that no one deserves to die that way. But I think they were speaking some truths that certain people didn't want out there or discussed in a broader sense. And I don't think we're living in a utopia. I think we're living in kind of a dystopia right now, especially with the way that governments and corporations can manipulate artificial intelligence and social media to control discourse and control our thoughts.
Right. See, I would blame humans more than aliens for that stuff. I think that they are taking advantage, and there's definitely proof in what you're saying that they're definitely manipulating. The question is to what degree, because the one thing you would think if it was all a matrix, if it was all total manipulation, the nuclear threat is a pretty big threat. And with the weapons and the way we're poisoning this planet, and if it's for their end and not ours, you would think that they would manipulate that out of us for their own good, for their own benefit. Because if we leave them a planet that's been damaged or is not livable, then nobody wins in that situation. So I love the theories. I appreciate it when people come up with theories, but I'm also the kind of guy that if I see something and I hear something, I'm going to reason through it. And I find a lot of reasons for people to believe those things. But I'm saying, to make it a whole package and say that it's all encompassing and we're living in the matrix, I'm probably not quite ready to go that far, but I do agree.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, and to your point with the nuclear threat thing, I think that was like the old world, massive existential and life extinction threat. Mm-hmm. But nowadays it really is artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, because you could leverage your ability to hack into a foreign intelligence or government system. You could hack a energy grid and shut it down in the middle of the winter and freeze to death a whole population. You could hack a nuclear power plant to explode and create a fallout in a country without even needing to drop a bomb there. These are the real threats of the future that, our generation have to worry about, that we're not talking about. Launching a nuclear missile is horrible, but at least you can see it coming, and, there's threat detection and maybe some kind of mitigation there. But hacking, it's like instant.
Well, you saw what happened. You saw what happened, and whether it was directed at the United Nations or not, but you saw all the servers that they found in those 4 different locations surrounding, New York and stuff. That scared me to death, because they could shut down all the 911 services. And you can just imagine if there was going to be a terrorist attack, that's probably the new age that we're in. And so, Darcy, you did a really, really good job I still think the nuclear threat's on the table, but I think you did a good job of let's understand that there are things going on now that the way we're going to get attacked probably isn't going to be nuclear, because they know if they go nuclear, we're going to go nuclear and nobody wins. But hey, I can use the very things that you were talking about. I can do it in such a way that you won't even know I did it, and I'll still get my end game. So
imagine they shut down the escalator remotely when you're trying to go up it at a conference or something. You could trip and die.
No, but I thought that was really good. I thought that, because I don't think a lot of people are thinking about, the danger of what they could do and shut down all the phone lines. My question, this is going to go to something we talked about earlier, Darcy. Both Ingle Swann and Joe McMoneagle, and I'm sure other remote viewers as well, they hated remote viewing things like UFOs. Yeah. And the reason they hated doing things like that is because there was no way of finding out if it was true. And I think one of them had described it, whether it was an invention, and what he meant by that was an invention of the mind, or whether you were actually seeing a real place. Right. So that's where I think the scientific part of it, wouldn't you agree that that's where that comes in? Now, here's where I'm going with that. I also believe it was Ingle Swann, I could be wrong, who was asked to remote view the moon. I told you that this would come up again. And they asked him to remote it back, I think it was 1 million BC. Mm-hmm. And he talked about people being stuck there in these chambers. He talked about remote viewed this huge pyramid that was, and the people were in there in these chambers, hoping to get rescued, hoping somebody would come back to them, kind of like a life support system is the way I think it was explained a little bit on your video. But people have gone, and it was on your video as well, and I've heard it before. This isn't new. This is something that's been out there, but that they found this object on the edge of a crater, and it looks like a big pyramid. This is, when we talk about a big pyramid, it's bigger than Khufu, in Giza. I mean, it is huge. And so they've locked on
pyramid. Yeah.
Yeah. They've locked onto this being a pyramid, but my concern with that is that just trying to use something to confirm something you already believe, or because right now, all I see when I look at it, and I'm a little bit of a skeptic, is I see a blurry picture of something that I can't tell if it's a pyramid or not. It could be a pyramid, but that seems to go against what, Swann and McMoneagle and other remote viewers, they wanted some way. I don't know that do you think that necessarily confirms it, or do we need to leave it in the field of unknown or invention at this point until we can get cameras over there and get a better picture of it?
Right. So, first of all, Swann loved remote viewing those types of targets. That was the difference. Paul Smith, maybe not, but Swann enjoyed looking at things like,
that was like treat to them. I understand, because they had all these military
UFOs, sort of anomalous targets. But he loved it until he remote viewed the moon, saw an intelligence there that was not us, and he believed that they kind of stalked him or haunted him after that event. So he was kind of like one of these hitchhiker phenomenon experiencers long ago. You know, if you talk about Skinwalker Ranch and people go there, some of them say that this hitchhiker effect takes place and something follows them off the ranch, right? But
well, if we're doing the scientific method is what I'm trying to get at. If we're doing the scientific method and we're trying to confirm it, does this help or hurt with these interpretations? How do we know if it's invention versus a place and people he actually saw?
Right. So let me get to that. So Jupiter, right, was a location that Ingo Swann remote viewed.
Yeah, because in his book, he brought that up, Darcy. That's the reason I went that way. He did not, in his own book, Penetration, that's what he said. He did not like remote viewing places that he couldn't confirm. But that was the nice thing. I'll let you finish about the ring that he remote viewed, but that's where I got it.
So everybody knows there's the rings of Saturn. They're very prevalent around that planet. And Jupiter, it just looks like the largest planet in our solar system. It's a gaseous giant. It has a core of, some kind, like a solid core underneath all that gas, but a lot of it is gas. And what scientists didn't 100% know at the time when Ingo remote viewed the planet of Saturn is that it also had a ring, Jupiter also had a ring like Saturn. And years later, when the gas went down a bit and they detected with a satellite that they sent around there through different optical visual spectrums, they saw through the gas that there was actually a ring, like a solid ring around the planet like Saturn. So that's like the chicken before the egg sort of situation, right? You have somebody that psychically views something, and then later on science confirms that to be true. And with Joe McMoneagle, he was given a target by the DIA to look at something. He didn't know at first. He had no preconception of what it was going to be. He started psychically viewing it and realized this is Mars. This is off planet. Wow, what the heck? He was sort of startled by what he was seeing that there was this higher intelligence there about 1 million years ago. And they built civilization there. They were much taller than us, like 12 feet plus. And they had technology and had clothes and, were dying off somehow. And there might have been some cataclysmic event that led to that. And the pyramids were the area that he was seeing on Mars, which is this region that's been coined as Cydonia. And if you look at pictures of it that were taken by Viking, which was a satellite we sent around, a probe that we sent around Mars to observe the landscape, there's apparently like a face-like structure there. People have sort of debunked that back and forth. There's multiple pyramids other than the very large one. But he actually went to NASA and requested photos of what he targeted. And he got a high-res image of, the larger pyramid and some other sites there. So, and he has that at his house, which, Chris Ramsey got a hold of. And not everybody in the public gets to see that version of the photo. The stuff that you see online is sometimes a different version.
Yeah, I think I probably got that wrong. I said the moon. It was Mars I was talking about. I believe so anyway. But it's interesting though, if that's true. I mean, we know with the UAP issue that the government is covering stuff up and they don't want us, to know about it, probably because they want to keep the technology secret from our adversaries. And then there's the profit side of it for the contractors. But why would they, on something, if there was life on Mars, and I believe there's a very, very good chance there was, especially since they've discovered that there's water, which is one of the key ingredients to life. But why wouldn't the scientific world, if these things were there pyramids, I mean, that should be, every scientist in the world should be going crazy right now. So is that a suppression, or what's the reason why the scientific community doesn't seem to align with our community, or people in our community making these statements that these pictures exist and NASA has them? Why isn't the scientific community more involved with that?
Because I think it has to do with the great information filter, right? Again, if we go back to sort of the Ingo Swann, we're living in a matrix that's controlled by the powers that be, that's possibly manipulated by a higher intelligence that don't want us to know about their presence here. The mainstream academic system is there to approve of truths or not. And if they don't approve of the truth that there are structures on Mars or the moon that are anomalous and they're not ours, then no one's going to take it seriously, and it prevents that story from actually being exploited or explored more, right? It keeps us here and keeps us thinking here and more controlled, I think. And I think, look at what mainstream science is doing right now, okay? NASA, the same day or the day before Charlie Kirk was unfortunately assassinated, they announced that they found signs of life in soil and fossilized life in rock that they've recovered from Mars samples, right? That was huge for them to finally say there might have been life other than us out there in our own solar system at one point. Okay. Yeah. But that's been completely overshadowed now. It's not the conversation that people are really discussing. Everybody's discussing social issues more. And there was a scientist that came out, I think in the early 90s, that said when he ran tests on Mars soil samples, he found signs of life through the chemistry that you would expect if microbes and ancient life possibly existed in that soil. And NASA, the same organization, came out, debunked him, tried to ruin his career. And here we are in 2025, and they're saying we found the same thing. So it's the great information filter. It's, we're going to tell you that truth when it's worth it to us, and it's something we can control and exploit to our own benefit, right? Obviously, we want to go out into space more and possibly become a space, faring race where everybody's allowed to maybe eventually get a ticket. And Mars is a destination for future colonization, right? That's the intent of people like Elon Musk and probably the military. And the moon is the launch pad for that sort of mission, right? So getting ahead of that and announcing, discoveries like that makes people more interested to a certain degree.
I have a question for you. I just want to make sure for clarification, because my mind keeps thinking that pyramid or whatever it was on the end of a crater, and everything in my mind and my memory says it was the moon. So did Ingo Swann not remote both the moon and Mars and see that there was life there at one point?
So Joe McMoneagle did that famous remote viewing of Mars and that location, Cydonia. Ingo Swann remote viewed the moon, but there's photos from the Apollo missions, and there's transcripts of the astronauts viewing what they're seeing on the lunar surface as they go by, and they talk about pyramid structures. And in the photos that I've shown in some of my previous documentaries, the Secret Space UFOs series, there looks like there's a pyramid inside of a crater, strangely enough, in one of these moon missions. So with Joe's photo and what he viewed, there was some kind of explosion that happened before. So that crater was created before, and then apparently like the pyramid was built beside it.
Yeah, that's exactly what was in the film. I appreciated that. We're running out of time, so I'm going to try to rush through this. But I think one thing that, I mean, the great filter, like you said, is true. But the other thing about it is it possible that for some of in the scientific world, we see it with the debunkers, is they start with the premise it can't be true, so therefore it isn't true.
Yeah, there's a predisposition there to want to debunk something because it's outside of their preconceived possibilities of what could be, right? But as long as there's data that's presented to them, like people that debunked that there was ever microbial life on Mars previous to 2025, they can now look over the data that NASA releases and, be asked, how do you like them apples?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay. Well, I had a question, and you've looked at a lot of different branches of the paranormal, and this is kind of the new one that's kind of I've been trying to figure out. Realize being a pastor and believing in spiritual stuff. But the more I listen to psychic abilities, the more I listen to remote viewing, ESP, and now that people are starting to really hone in on what's known as consciousness. And so are all those things really one and the same, a product of consciousness? Because consciousness is outside of our five senses. It's outside of this physical body that we have. And so, I just wanted your thoughts. Do you think that these are all connected in some way or another, or maybe all fall under the umbrella of consciousness?
Yeah, consciousness is a great mystery to science, to mainstream science, right? We know that it's there. I think, therefore, I am. I'm of the theory that we're both a field, but we're also mechanical. We're a 3D being, and in that sort of mechanical setup of what we are is our brain, and consciousness comes from here, right? So your ability and your quality of consciousness is also linked to how developed your brain is and what your brain's capabilities are, in my opinion. That's the sort of mechanical way of looking at consciousness and how it could be, right? And how far it can go. And I think psychic abilities are connected to that consciousness. Yes.
Okay.
A lot of people talk about like a non-local consciousness. That might be this like information field that our brains connect to. That
like an internet.
Yeah, it's like a invisible.
That's what I was getting.
Sort of library, so to speak. The
couldn't that explain ESP too?
The more like wooey crowd will say the Akashic records, right? That's just to put some interesting name on a unfound and proven sort of like information field that exists outside of our bodies that we can sometimes connect to and pull information from, right? I think there needs to be more study of that, and there probably will be or has been behind closed doors, in my opinion. So I think, consciousness is something that hasn't been fully mapped or understood in the mainstream scientific community. It's something constantly sliced into and studied in smaller parts, but maybe we will eventually understand that, or maybe we're not supposed to fully understand that. And again, that is a mechanism for control.
Right. It's kind of, I think it would fall under the realm metaphysical. It's like, well, how do you scientifically test certain things? You can test the effect of it, maybe, but how do you ever truly get to the source of it? And I think that will be one of the challenges when we get to consciousness and trying to figure out what it is. Now, one of the things I noticed that was missing that in the documentary, and my suspicion is that you're going to cover it in some other deeper level, that there's no way you wanted to throw it in with this, and that is psionics.
Psionics. Yeah, I mean, like, that's the whole CE5 protocols and stuff. It's the same. It is, meditation and psychic, a psychic tool and meditation technique, right? Which you don't have to buy an app. You don't have to prescribe to a certain group to do that. You can just probably practice it on your own and you'll get some degree of effective ability, or you can do it obviously with other people. But I think that is it's important to also realize that an egregore is a real thing. We manifest things in reality by focusing on them and thinking that they're real, and therefore they eventually become real, right? And there's some dangers in that, but then there's also some great achievements that have been made. I mean, when you bring together a group of scientists or engineers to build something, or technologists, computer programmers to build an app, that egregore is them thinking, we need to make this, and it eventually manifests because of their hard work. I think there's also the ability to do that with your mind and create something that isn't there, schizophrenically. And then there's also the ability to see something that's already there physically, but to imagine it as a UFO or a non-human intelligence when really it might be a satellite. So that sort of stuff happens too.
Some people argue that with schizophrenia, I don't know how you prove it or not, but that there actually are seeing things that are really there, and just other people can't tap into it. We just, we've lost that ability. And I think as technology increases, we've somehow get away from the psychic abilities. And I think there's somewhere along the way we need to bridge the gap, because we need science, but we need to recognize the other things that are going on that are real, and not ignore them just because they don't fit in that scientific box. And I'm excited though, Darcy, because I think that we're finally at a point in time, if we don't kill ourselves or blow ourselves up or whatever else, I think we're finally at a time that we're gonna see some exciting things happen. I know you said you had an hour. We're slightly over it, so I want to go ahead and I don't want to hold you up, but I wanted to ask you this one last question. You put a lot of work into this film. Obviously, when you put that much work into something, you want people to get something out of it. And so what in the world do you want people to get out of your film? What is it that you're hoping for?
That psychic abilities are real.
Right.
And it wasn't just me. I put a lot of work into it, but there was a guy named Jason Boulay, Tom Thompson, whole list of other characters that helped with the creation of this film. So, thank you to their efforts. And I hope people enjoy this story and get something out of it.
Well, I'll say this. I'm going to give a couple plugs, because Tom Thompson is also a friend of mine. And I mean, that guy is a storyteller and a half. I mean, that guy, he's got the voice for it. And then Gary Armitage, he also helped you do some of the artwork or that kind of stuff on there. And so I like that. I really like it when people collaborate and stuff. And then you also work with the guy from Ramsey from Area 52. And I think it makes a better product when it's a team effort, and it helps, make it where you don't get all worn out, especially with a new baby and all. Let me go ahead and get the links up there real quick. So if you want to watch the movie, The Psychic Phenomenon, here's the link It's on Amazon.com, and there's everything. If you also, a couple of links for Darcy is media@occultjourneys.com, and then www.occultjourneys.com. Now, I want to say this. I've also put the links. If you look below in the description, I put a link to every one of Darcy's movies. I think the ones that were sent. And then I put a link that will take you to the whole, to it as well. So you got the individuals, and then you have one that'll take you to it. And Darcy, you've done some incredible work. I've been so excited to see your latest films coming out. It just, everyone just seems to get better. You get better and better at what you do. And I'm really excited because I had the privilege of being able to see this film, and it was one I was very interested in, and so I thoroughly enjoyed it. Darcy, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast, and we're definitely going to have you back. You have anything you want to share with the audience before you go?
Yeah, I just typing in your chat here on YouTube. If people want to watch Puerto Rico's UAP for free, they can just go to my YouTube channel on Occult Journeys on YouTube.
Yeah, that was one of the links we just put up, and it will also be, I'll put that up there for everybody to see it. Yeah, and they also, like I said, it's in the description. So anybody watching this podcast will be able to go just in the description just below and be able to see that. And so here's the other
cool,
one.
Man.
So
yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. Of course, it's great keeping in touch with you, and hope you're doing well, man.
I am doing better now that I've had another podcast with you. Anyway, I'll pull you out and do my closing here. Well, I want to thank you for watching this podcast, and I sure hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'm just asking you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really helps. And hit the bell. That way you'll get all the notification for the upcoming podcasts that'll be coming this way. Anyway, you have a good day. Thank you so much for being here.
This is the future.
Take your time, it could be